Putin's army is mobilizing in Belarus. In the past 24 hours, the Ukrainian military claims to have killed over 500 Russian soldiers and destroyed various military hardware. According to the Ukrainian Air Force, they've destroyed 8 Shahed 136 suicide drones made in Iran in the south and east. Zelensky accused Moscow of using these recruits as cannon fodder and criticized Russia for recruiting new soldiers for its conflict. Oleksiy Reznikov, the defense minister of Ukraine, asserts that Russia only has 609 high-precision missiles left. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. We'll discuss in today's video why Putin's army is mobilizing in Belarus. And stay tuned till the end of the video for some other exciting questions like, do Russian troops exist in Belarus? How many soldiers are there in Belarus? How powerful is the Belarusian military? And some other factors. Hence, let's start. Military specialists claim that Belarus's dictatorial leader Alexander Lukashenko is purportedly allowing up to 10,000 recently mobilized Russian troops to train there, and at least 211 pieces of heavy military sending Moscow hardware, including trucks and tanks. Exiled opposition figure Sviatlana Tishanyuskaya talks to VOA about Lukashenko's efforts to support Russia's weakened armed forces. Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, has stated that he has no plans for massive strikes on Ukraine. Also asked if he regretted his actions in Ukraine, the Russian president responded, "I have no regrets." According to the UK Defense Ministry, Russian troops are moving toward the eastern town of Bakhmut. According to reports, Alexander Lukashenko, president of Belarus, has begun a clandestine mobilization to bolster his combat units. Elon Musk, a billionaire American, has stated that SpaceX cannot indefinitely support Starlink terminals in Ukraine. Plans for a joint investigation into the Nord Stream sabotage with Germany and Denmark have been rejected by Sweden. Initially denying any involvement in the conflict, Belarus has since acknowledged that it did indeed permit Russian missile launchers stationed on its soil to fire at Ukrainian targets. Several claims that Belarusian troops were fighting alongside Russians in Ukraine surfaced among the Ukrainian military and the opposition. Still, Alexander Lukashenko, the leader of Belarus, dismissed them and declared that the Belarusian armed forces would not take a direct part in the conflict. I think, first of all, you should have a look at the Russian invasion. Although Belarus does not appear to have sent its soldiers into the fighting, Russian troops used its territory to attack Ukraine in the early stages of the war. On the day of the invasion, information reached Ukraine's State Border Guard Service of Russian troops attempting to enter the Belarus-Ukraine border at the Vilcha border crossing, and an unidentified helicopter assaulting a bridge nearby Slavutich. In a video published by CNN, tanks can be seen crossing into Ukraine from Russia at the Senkivka border crossing. Chernobyl and the nearby former nuclear power plant were taken that day after Russian troops crossed into Ukraine from Belarus via the empty Chernobyl exclusion zone. Additionally, Belarus gave Russia complete access to its army installations and military airfields so that a Russian military aircraft could launch from them and fire artillery and missiles at its southern neighbor or cross the border southward. The head of the Ukrainian military reported that 4 ballistic missiles had already been launched from Belarus toward the southwest of Ukraine as early as February 24th. 2 days later, Maxar Technologies released satellite images showing 150 helicopters and hundreds of ground vehicles stationed close to Kioniki, about 50 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, with 90 helicopters using a nearby straight road as a makeshift airbase. Numerous videos and images showing the movement of Russian armored vehicles and helicopters in southern Belarus were also shared on Telegram channels and in Belarusian media. Is Belarus's military capable of attacking Ukraine? The simultaneous start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine came from 4 main directions, one of which involved Belarusian territory. Then, it was anticipated that Belarusian soldiers would directly enter the conflict. But even after 4 months of Russia's war, Belarus's autocrat Alexander Lukashenko refuses to send his troops to battle. Did you know that the Special Operations Forces are the only military force in Belarus with relevant combat experience? 3 elite infantry brigades with a combined strength of 3,000 to 6,000 soldiers make up this branch. These have consistently shown to be the most reliable and effective military units in Belarus. What is the purpose of Russia's most recent troop deployment to Belarus? According to Lukashenko, the Russians will serve as reinforcements while the Belarusian military will provide the unit's core personnel. Elena experienced more than fear when tens of thousands of Russian troops, including those from Belarus, poured over the border into Ukraine at the beginning of Russia's unprovoked invasion in late February. "He is my heir, the meaning of my life," she said of her only son, who was conscripted into Belarusian military service in May 2021. "I felt more than just fear for my son. I don't even know how to describe it. It was wild horror. I was hysterical, just sobbing in the restroom at work." Will Putin send organized Russians to Belarus in preparation for a fresh offensive from Kyiv? Vladimir Putin's decision to order Russia's first mobilization since World War II has raised fears in Belarus's neighboring nation that it may once again act as a focal point for the continuing invasion of Ukraine. There are growing worries that Moscow may send a sizable portion of these newly mobilized forces to Belarus to launch a second assault on Kyiv, as hundreds of thousands of Russians are now being called up for military service. In early 2022, during the first month of the invasion, Russian troops marched on the Ukrainian capital from Belarus, but suffered terrible losses and were forced to retreat. The Special Operations Forces are the only military force in Belarus with relevant combat experience. 3 elite infantry brigades with a combined strength of 3,000 to 6,000 soldiers make up this branch. These have consistently shown to be the most reliable and effective military units in Belarus. 2 brigades took part in the brutal repression of the 2020 protests, which were brought on by presidential elections that the international community deemed neither free nor fair. While the Belarusian army lacks combat experience, the Special Operations Forces have worked with the OSCE mission in Donbass, participated in peacekeeping missions in Lebanon, and helped fight riots in Kazakhstan in January 2022. With a more significant Soviet-style force, these soldiers offer a well-trained tiny army and directly report to the Belarusian Armed Forces General Staff. For the Belarusian army, combat in a theater of operations is problematic, suggested Labayadok. The best use of Belarusian forces is reconnaissance and sabotage operations against particular targets and Ukrainian troop convoys. Belarus declared 2022 to be the year of combat training in December of that year, according to state-run news agency BEITA. Indeed, there have been a ton of military exercises this year. In January and February, Belarus and Russia engaged in military activities that eventually served to train Russian troops for a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Thus, ongoing military exercises in Belarus are currently raising questions. The Belarusian Defense Ministry conducts scheduled command and staff exercises, inspections of the response force, mobilization drills, and the reactivation of military equipment in storage. The number of participating troops is unknown, and the drills are still going on after their originally scheduled end date. Lukashenko would come under intense pressure to put down any internal dissent if Russia did decide to send large numbers of troops to Belarus to create a new northern front in the invasion of Ukraine. A group known as the Railway Partisans sabotaged the nation's train network to obstruct the transit of Russian troops and military equipment during the early stages of the conflict, when Russia used Belarus as a crucial staging area for the invasion. Conclusion: there are also worries that if pressed by Putin, Lukashenko might order a mobilization in Belarus itself. Recent data from Narodny Operas, which polls opposition supporters in Belarus, shows that 67% of respondents think that mobilized men would either flee the country or go into hiding rather than join the military. On the other hand, 40% are already concerned about the possibility of mobilization. Whether Putin's decision to move forward with mobilization will once again put Belarus at the center of Russia's invasion of Ukraine is unclear. Any attempt to launch a fresh assault on Kyiv via Belarus would probably run afoul of home and pose new dangers to Lukashenko's unstable regime. Nevertheless, Lukashenko may find himself forced to back his patron in the end, given that Russia is now clearly losing the war and Putin is trying harder than ever to seize the initiative. So, that's it for today's video. Well, what are your thoughts on the Russia-Ukraine never-ending war? Will things ever get back to normal? Let us know in the comment section. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon. Thanks for watching.